Good morning from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. You're looking live at Launch Pad 39A, where SpaceX is loading fuel aboard a Falcon Heavy rocket ahead of a static test firing of the 27 Merlin engines on the first stage core boosters. This test is coming ahead of the planned launch of NASA's Psyche asteroid mission. That launch is scheduled for October 12th. It was due to occur the next Thursday on October 5th, but due to a problem with the spacecraft thrusters, which NASA has yet to fully explain, the agency decided to push back the launch by a week so it could work on that problem and resolve that issue. So if we take a closer look at the launch pad, you can see vapors are forming around the first stage booster. This is our main indication that the test is underway. SpaceX is not providing any updates, as is usual for one of their tests. So at this point in the countdown, SpaceX will be loading liquid oxygen on all three of the boosters. That would have begun at the T-minus 45-minute mark. It is also loading rocket-grade kerosene. That's RP1, and it started loading that on the boosters at about T-minus 50 minutes. And the loading of RP1 on the second stage of the rocket, that began just about 3 minutes ago at T-minus 35 minutes. The final tank that will be filled today is the liquid oxygen tank on the second stage, and that operation won't get underway until the T-minus 18.5 minute mark. These times are a little bit different if you're used to a regular Falcon 9 launch, but there is a lot more propellant that needs to be loaded with essentially 3 Falcon 9 first stages strapped together here on the launch pad to form the Falcon Heavy vehicle. We'd really appreciate it if you could hit the like button on this stream. It will really help bring it to a wider audience. Over the course of the next 10 minutes or so, SpaceX should start loading cryogenic helium aboard the pressure vessels that reside inside the propellant tanks on the Falcon Heavy boosters. That helium is used to pressurize the tanks and force propellants into the system so that the engines are supplied with the liquid oxygen and kerosene that they need. We're now 29 minutes from ignition of the 27 Merlin 1D engines. Those engines will fire for just a matter of seconds to ensure that all is well with the Falcon Heavy vehicle. This is a standard procedure with a Falcon Heavy launch. We've only had one Falcon Heavy mission where a static fire was not performed. Static fires are a fairly rare occurrence now with the Falcon 9 vehicle. The Falcon Heavy rocket was rolled to Launch Pad 39A yesterday. It emerged from the hangar at Launch Complex 39A at about 12:30 a.m. and was in its place at the top of the launch pad at about 3 a.m., a little bit after 3 a.m. in the morning. Was then raised into the upright position by the transporter erector structure that you can see. And that occurred yesterday morning. SpaceX had originally scheduled this test for Friday, but preparations for that test had been running behind schedule. SpaceX was also planning the launch of a Falcon 9 with some Starlink satellites. So with the delay of a week in the launch, they decided to take the extra time and perform the test today instead. Originally, it had been scheduled for 9 a.m. on Friday. Once again, if you're just joining us, you're looking live at Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. SpaceX is getting ready for a static fire of the Falcon Heavy rocket that will launch NASA's Psyche asteroid mission. Liftoff of that mission is now scheduled for October 12th. It has been delayed a week due to a problem with the thrusters on that spacecraft. As you can see, it's quite a cloudy backdrop here at the Kennedy Space Center. We're looking at a view from the press site showing the countdown clock and the flag. The launch of a Falcon 9 with 22 Starlink satellites was delayed last night because of the weather. But the weather shouldn't be a problem for this static fire where the Falcon 9 is held down on the launch pad as the first stage engines are fired for a short time. Now T-minus 23 minutes to the ignition of the Falcon Heavy. Very soon we should be seeing the so-called big vent from the Strongback. That's the chill down of that Strongback structure. The propellant lines that run up the Strongback provide the fueling for the second stage of the Falcon Heavy. And the big vent, as we like to call it, will chill down those lines prior to the start of propellant load, and there it begins. Very still conditions here, as evidenced by the venting just shrouding the vehicle. There's very little wind to disperse that vapor today. Quite a spectacular event today. Now T-minus 20 minutes and counting to the test firing of the Falcon Heavy. Once again, this vent is chilling down the propellant lines that feed the second stage liquid oxygen tank, and the loading of propellants aboard that tank, the liquid oxygen super chilled to densify the liquid oxygen and pack in more punch into those tanks. The more densified the fuel, the more fuel you can get aboard the rocket. And SpaceX has super chilled that propellant on its Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy vehicles to maximize performance. And that loading should get underway at the T-minus 18.5 minute mark. There we see completion of that vent, and at this point the loading of liquid oxygen into the second stage should be underway. Once again, SpaceX is not providing any updates of this test, That's their usual procedure, but we can tell from some of these milestones which point we are in the countdown. So we are continuing to look at a T0 ignition at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 1300 UTC. Now less than 16 minutes to the ignition of the Falcon Heavy booster. Big thank you to Greg Scott for his Super Chat contribution. Greg does great work here covering the space program. Any contributions that we get go towards improving our launch coverage. We're working towards moving all of our equipment to 4K so we can bring you the best possible views of activities here on the Space Coast. So if you're one of our members, you are supporting our coverage, if you would like to become a member, please do so. It really helps us out. If you're not able to help us financially, just hitting the like button and sharing the stream really is a big help too. Now less than 12 minutes to the ignition of the Falcon Heavy at Launch Pad 39A. This test will see the 27 Merlin 1D engines ignite for a brief firing. We should see a large plume. If we're lucky, we might also catch some audio from the microphones we have here. There can be a bit of a rumble sometimes. On other occasions, we hear nothing. So it takes a few seconds for that sound to reach us here at the Kennedy Space Center press site. So after ignition, listen in for that. Now less than 10 minutes to the ignition of the Falcon Heavy at Launch Pad 39A. Core stage of this Falcon Heavy is booster number 1079. It'll be making its first flight. SpaceX was never able to successfully recover the Falcon Heavy core center booster. The side boosters have both made three previous flights. This will be their fourth flight on the Psyche mission. They flew on the Space Force USS F-44 and 67 missions, and the EchoStar 24 Jupiter 3 Falcon Heavy launch we saw in July of this year. Side boosters are boosters 1064 and 1065. The Falcon 9, as you can see, is completely shrouded in vapors. That's caused by the cold surface of the propellant tanks coming into contact with the humid Florida air, and with the very light wind here today, we're not seeing those vapors being dispersed, and they're shrouding the vehicle and pooling on the deck of the launch pad. So at this point, The chill down of those 27 Merlin engines should be underway. That's a process to cool down the engine components so they are not shocked by the sudden arrival of super cold liquid oxygen propellants. That process is underway now. We'll see the retraction of the Strongback coming up at about the T-minus 4.5 minute mark. Now less than 6 minutes to the ignition of the Falcon Heavy rocket. Is going to plan. We should start to see the retraction of the Strongback structure. That'll be coming up soon, about 30 seconds. T-minus 5 minutes. For the opening of those clamps at the top of the second stage. They hold the Strongback to the Falcon Heavy, provide some structural support. Prior to the retraction, the tanks are pressurized a little bit just to give the Falcon Heavy a little more structural support with that Strongback structure moving away. Away to about an angle of about 1.5 degrees. Not sure if we're seeing any movement there or not. Hard to tell with all the vapors. I think we do see that Strongback structure retracting now. See a gap opening up at the top of the structure where the clamp arms are, and the top of the Falcon Heavy is the second stage of the rocket. We should be nearing completion of loading of liquid oxygen, loading of kerosene should already be complete. Now less than 3 minutes to ignition of the Falcon Heavy. Just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, please hit the like button. That really helps us out. Thank you to John Boy for his comments and Super Chat contribution. Once again, that really allows us to bring you these views. We can only do this by the support of our members and our viewers. So thank you very much for your contribution. And if you're not able to contribute financially, please just hit the like button. That really helps us out. T-minus 2 minutes and counting. T-minus 1 minute mark, the Falcon Heavy's onboard computers should take control of the countdown. The launch director will verify that they are go for the static fire during that final minute. The final propellant tank pressurization will take place. And the ignition sequence will start at about T-minus 6 seconds. And that static fire will probably last less than 10 seconds. T-minus 1 minute and counting. Falcon Heavy's onboard computers should now have control of the countdown. Seconds. We obviously can't listen in, but the launch director should have given their go. 30 seconds and counting. $20. 15. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. We have ignition. Duct in the flame trench of the launch pad. You can see some smoke rising. So visually, it appeared to be a good test. We heard a good roar from those Falcon Heavy engines. This test was taking place ahead of the launch of NASA's Psyche mission to the asteroid of the same name. It's the first mission to explore a metallic asteroid. That launch is scheduled for October 12th, a week later than had been planned. the SpaceX launch team, who are at the company's Hangar X facility here at the Kennedy Space Center, will now be safing the vehicle, starting to drain those propellants that they loaded aboard. The process takes an hour or so to perform, and it takes quite a bit longer to safe the vehicle and ensure that everything is okay for crews to return to the area. You can still see the residue of the firing in this wide shot. The weather conditions here at the Kennedy Space Center are incredibly calm, very little wind. So we'll stand by for any announcements from SpaceX on the outcome of today's test. NASA officials will also have been monitoring the static fire. Psyche is a $1 billion mission, and NASA has a lot of oversight into the operations. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us for our live coverage of the static test fire of the Falcon Heavy ahead of NASA's Psyche mission. We'll be back next week with launch coverage, expecting another Falcon 9 carrying Starlink satellites, and an Atlas V carrying the first prototype satellites for Amazon's Kuiper network. That's a rival network to SpaceX's Starlink. So thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning, and we look forward to seeing you for further coverage. Check our website, Spaceflight Now, and our social media feeds for any updates on the outcome of today's static fire. So from the Kennedy Space Center, I'm Stephen Young. Wish you a very good weekend.